This one's called the Lover's Carapace. Entwined thoughts, harboring thoughts of someone, I think, grasp tight the will of the mind. Enjoy the cunning of these vines, which fray from the sanity brink and find you paralyzed. Entreating you to come so ever closer, they mark you with the cuts of leaves, razor thin, unnoticeable and scarcely felt, wherein they've penetrated and are still coming closer, closer. The conqueror, these thoughts, encasing yourself as it cleaves through your body like worms on a corpse, leaves you in the softest coffin, love. And thy body will be committed, submitted fully and de-witted, as the worldly cares are lifted from you by these entwined thoughts, which now protect and harbor you, care for you, and yet masterfully bind you, and you will love and have been loved.
Tell me more about this poem. I mean, it doesn't sound like a typical love poem.
No,
it's imagery of death and worms and...
Well, it's actually a mixture of the idea of love being both liberating and constricting, and Edgar Allan Poe's poem.
I was thinking about it actually. Yeah.
Yeah, The Conqueror Worm, which I've always been a very big fan of Poe. He's the writer that got me into poetry.
What did you find so good about Allan Poe?
He's got a very split form of poetry. He has some of the most awkward, dark poetry that really makes you think about the sublime. And at the same time, he has some of the best love poems that I've ever read.
What do you, I mean, this is kind of an obvious question, but what did you think of The Raven?
The Raven, it was good. It was good. As far as his stories go, I much preferred Fall of the House of Usher. And even though The Raven is one of the most popular ones, I think that's because it's one of the more easily read poem stories that he has. It had a lot of elements that attract me to Poe. It has the kind of looming feeling of something watching you, embodied in The Raven. But that's pretty much the running theme, is there's something watching, there's something that he doesn't know about, and I don't know, it gets a little bit redundant to me.
How would you define yourself as a poet? What kind of poetry would you say you write? I mean, Poe-like is one sense, but
some cases.
You mentioned last time I talked to you in face-to-face, you said you like Sylvia Plath.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I can't say that I really write only dark poetry. This one's definitely more like that. But I'm a more sporadic poet. I write to capture the memory of what I'm thinking at the time.
What were you thinking at the time when you wrote this?
The poem, The Conqueror Worm. More or less, this is a tribute poem that adds a little bit of my own thoughts into it. Sometimes I do that. Generally, when I'm writing, it's because I have an idea or a thought in my head that I don't want to forget about. So like this one right here, I was thinking of The Conqueror Worm, and then also about past relationships and how everything kind of just dies in the end. And then I mixed in with it my own feeling that everything that has been and everything that's dying, there's always hope of that rekindling. There's always life after death. There's always something.
Do you believe that there's life after death?
Yes, I have a very hard time believing in oblivion.
So what kind of life after death? Is it reincarnation? What kind of vision do you have of...
Well, I personally am a Christian. I have a very odd take on Christianity. In philosophical terms, I'm an idealist, meaning there is no physical. So the way I incorporate that into Christianity is the idea that thoughts are what create human beings. You know, and we are all part of the divine thought of God.
Now, how does your poetry relate to your own Christian belief about or your idealist Christianity?
Actually, I don't think I've ever written about that. It's typically something that I think about more than actually write about.
Because I was thinking, I grew up with the Bible myself, and that idea that the Word is God, the Logos, at the very beginning of the Gospel of John, it seems like a very, very powerful tradition within Christianity, and that many poets, regardless of their particular religious inclination, has been very taken by this idea, because to think that the Word has such power, that it's direct linkage to God. You know, in the beginning was the Word. Wait, in the beginning, God said this or that, and something was created. Do you believe that a poet has a divine function in our society? In a secular society like ours, where there is no seemingly God, or...
I think that a poet can be attributed those qualities. I think incorrectly.
Mm-hmm.
What a poet does, in my opinion, is regurgitate ideas. That's not a very divine image in my mind. They take what they've seen and what people have told them, and they retell it in order that it's not forgotten. So, like with this right here, you know, I can't help but saying, yes, Poe inspired this. A poet inspired me to do this. And I can say that about most of my poetry. And most poets can say that something inspired them. It might not be another poet. It might be something in nature. Typically, at one time, it was all from nature. But to say then that poets themselves are divine is kind of an improper ego boost. The ability for a poet to manipulate the power of words and try to claim that is very possible, especially surrounded by people who may have never considered half of the things that the poet's speaking about.
What made you want to become a poet? I mean, it seems like not exactly a profession that people rush to.
Well, it's not very lucrative in this day and age.
Not at all.
But probably because I have a very hard time remembering things. And as I said, poetry is my way of writing down thoughts in ways that speak to me. And so I can go back and I can, you know, say read one of my love poems and feel exactly how I felt at that particular time. Sometimes it brings back images that are related to it. Sometimes it's more for just a good laugh of a fun moment in my history. And so, without the poems that I have, I lose a lot of myself. And I don't like pictures, so it's at least one way of recording my past.
Do you expect readers of your poems or listeners of your poems to see the same thing that you see when you remember these things through a poem? Because obviously they're thinking of different images, different memories.
True. I guess I just hope that some things that I've gone through, other people that read them can relate to. And if they can relate to it, then maybe they might be able to bring something out of it themselves. I've got a very selfish style of poetry.
What do you mean by selfish?
It's more for me than anybody else. I don't like revision because if I revised it so that other people may like it more, it would lose its meaning to me.
Do you have any advice to aspiring poets, people who want to write poems themselves, as someone who's been doing this for years?
Well, there's a lot of different ways to write poetry. There is the very academic form of poetry with very complicated rhyme schemes and patterns, which is very fun. I've done a few poems like that myself. Experiment. Find out what your style is before you sit down and say, all right, this is the style of poetry I'm going to write. I've been writing poems since I was still in homeschooling, which was back in the 3rd and 4th grade. And ever since then, I've always tried different styles, including styles that I've been completely appalled with. I'm not a fan of erotica poetry, for instance. But I've wrote one erotica poem. And that one poem made me realize how much I disliked it, because it was not true erotica. It came close, but it still strayed away from that completely lustful feeling that erotica poetry seeks to bring out in the reader.
You're too much of an idealist even in writing erotica?
What's that?
You were too much of an idealist even in writing erotica poem?
I guess. I don't know. Like I said, it came close, but it focused more on the sensual rather than the sexual, which, from what I've read of erotica, is not what erotica seeks to produce. It's very materialistic when it comes to that.
Cool. Thank you very much. Kyle Blackston.